Okay, so food justice and the Sustainable Development Goals. As we know, our food comes from all over the world, and that Saskatchewan and even Manitoba we're not food secure. So I wanted to talk about food sovereignty first. So it was coined, concept was coined by La Via Campesina. So it's the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, and define their own food and agriculture systems. It puts those who produce, distribute, and consume food at the heart of food systems and policies, rather than the demands of markets and corporations. It defends the interests and inclusion of the next generation. It offers a strategy to resist and dismantle the current corporate trade and food regime, and prioritizes local and national economies and markets. It empowers local producers to direct food, farming, pastoral, and fisheries systems. It empowers peasant and family farmer-driven agriculture, artisanal fishing, pastoralist-led grazing. And it ensures that food production, distribution, and consumption are based on environmental and social and economic sustainability. It promotes transparent trade that guarantees just income to all peoples and the rights of consumers to control their food and nutrition. It ensures that the rights to use land and manage the lands, territories, waters, seeds, livestock, and biodiversity are in the hands of those who produce food. And it implies new social relations free of oppression, inequality between men and women, peoples, racial groups, social classes, and generations. So that, to me, is the basis of what we're doing here. And that might not be the understanding of everybody, but I feel like that has a lot in it that I think we can work with. So it's a paradigm shift. We're all interconnected. We are nature, and the health of humans is reliant on the health of the earth. So some of the things that, like, new ways of thinking about, like, as opposed to the corporate agriculture model, is just transition, agroecology, regenerative organic agriculture, and permaculture. So there's a lot that is happening in different places. Like I know, like I'm involved with permaculture, so I know that there's strong groups in the I'm going to say the three provinces because it is like the prairies. And so I know, and just transition's a bit harder, but it is happening. So I'm not going to go through, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of this, but if anybody has any questions about that. So just transition, agroecology, regenerative organic agriculture, and then permaculture. So those are some concepts we could use in our promotions, and that we could partner with those people that are doing this work too. So this is about permaculture. And then this piece about social permaculture, like you can grow as many tomatoes as you want, but if everybody's fighting over them, or nobody will distribute them, or people don't want to pay for them, it doesn't matter how many tomatoes you have. Like, we need to be able to get along with each other. So it's that conflict resolution, transformation, like community building that we have to work on too. So I think that that's important, the conflict transformation. So this piece is about, I mean, first of all, does anybody have any questions about any of that? Did I, like, let me know. Are we good?
I did put a little question there, and it may sound kind of crazy because I'm looking, I don't know, Dave's sitting in front of me, and I know one of the big things for Dave is like being able to go out and hunt once a year to feed his family, right? And where does that fit in at all in terms of this piece? Like, I get curious a little bit about like that, and I know that's a contentious kind of topic a lot of times, but I also, I don't know, it was just something that was sitting with me. I don't know, Dave, if you have any thoughts on that, but I just
yeah, I just kind of curious too. Does hunting, fishing, and trapping, does that fit as well, or?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I mean, permaculture is about producing your own food, and it's like on a more local scale. So absolutely that fits in there. And I think that like Evelyn was talking about like indigenous food systems and stuff. So I feel like that's a really important piece that we have to put in here is not just like market gardens or whatever, but like, there is hunting, trapping, fishing. Like that's a big part of Saskatchewan and Manitoba and Alberta. Like absolutely no doubt about it. Local food. And then basically food sovereignty means you can get your own food that you want to eat. You're not relying on, XL Foods or whatever it's called now in Alberta to provide you hamburgers. That's not sustainable. So definitely.
Is there any way to get this, like the slides in small after? Is that something like, so that I can like have it like notes? Is that okay? Not now. It just helps because I put a few little things down of where I can look things up, but then I won't spend my whole time scribbling.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this, like, you can have this presentation. You can do whatever you want with it. Like and I like the slides actually explain themselves, and I'm kind of reading them because it has all the information that you need, so that it isn't about what I have in my brain. It's about, this is the information that people need about these topics. So absolutely, whatever. And like I said, I can go into more detail on any topic, but I just, like, in the interest of time, and I don't want to just talk the whole time, So I think, to me, it's important to talk about, like, what we just talked about is where we want to be. Like, that's where we want to be, but this is where we are right now. So oppression, racism, and climate catastrophe. So acknowledging that Indigenous people were forcibly removed from their land, and also people of African descent who have done so much of the work but have not benefited from their labor, and are a small percentage of landowners. So acknowledging that as the basis of what we're talking about here. So systemic racism and colonization. And I think, like, there could be a way that we could educate about that too. But of course, I don't know how deep we're going, right? Migrant workers, of course, that's the modern day slavery in some ways. And that is happening all over the world. So this is a global thing. Like, we're local and grassroots, but it's global. It's an issue. And women, looking at women's rights. Women do the majority of the world's work, have very little income, property, land, or decision-making power. And then, of course, the planet is being destroyed. So, these are some of the bigger topics. And we have corporate concentration of food. So right now, seeds, agrochemicals, fertilizers, livestock genetics, pharmaceuticals, machinery, grocery, and processed and fast food, like, it is concentrated into the hands of extremely few companies and people. So there's the big 6 firms that dominated the sale of seeds. And then, of course, they merged. So it's even worse now. There's like just the amount of power that people have over our food system is something that people, I don't know if people know, but it's such a serious issue. So some of the consequences are like what's produced, how it's produced, and who has access to it. And then that monopoly piece where now if nobody else can get it themselves, then you can charge whatever you want for it. And that really puts us, that makes us really vulnerable. There's limited competition. Like, for example, Amazon owns a lot of the food now, like, wow, and there's less transparency and innovation. The motive is profit, and that's not good for nutrition or distribution or that sort of thing. So extremely low worker wages, poor treatment of farmers. Farmers are fleeing the land. We are losing our farmers. Like, it is like, it's one of the other things of, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think right now. I'll think of it later. But suppliers, negative health consequences, negative environmental impacts of the concentration of power. And of course, just how much corporations are influencing governments. So, and then the decline of rural communities, which I mean, that could be something we could talk about too, is just the loss of farmers. Like, and that's a big issue that we could talk about, like the corporate concentration of land in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, and that the family farmers are gone, and it's hard for us to get anybody back on the land, and that's dangerous if we don't have control of the land. And then just like looking at where does our food come from? Like, that's the other thing. It's like people think our food comes from the supermarket. It's like, no, like, where did it come from? Who made it? What conditions were they treated? So, I mean, value chain analysis doesn't sound that fun, but it's just like, who has the power? Where did it come from? What are the impacts on people, workers, and the environment? So, you know, that sort of deep dive into it. We waste 58% of our food. And then what about water, transportation, forests, deforestation? And then like read labels. Like, there's a lot of chemicals in food. So it's for our health, we need to like have a better understanding of the food system. And then farmers, like I've been thinking about like farmers markets and local food and, you know, that sort of thing. Like, how do we, where do they fit in? So of course, other inputs into the food system are oil, which is huge. So if we want to get to some sort of zero or low carbon economy, the way we do food now, it's not the way to do that. So for every calorie of food that's produced, 10 to 15 calories of fossil fuel energy are put into the system. So it is not sustainable. And as oil gets more expensive and scarce, food's going to get more expensive as well. And then water, obviously there's so much water per pound, like that embedded water, and water is also like, we are having water shortages. So like we have to think about water. And then like I was saying about land, like land grabbing it's a global crisis of land grabbing. So the large scale acquisitions of land and other resources. So like I've studied land grabbing a lot, super interesting, but yeah, the land is being concentrated in the hands of a few for sure. And it's not just land. So if you own land, you own the ports and the roads and the water, and you know, it's more than just the land itself. It's a lot of infrastructure. And people are forced off the land. And mainly a lot of it is just like hedge funds buying land. Like they're not, like, maybe they're growing food, maybe they're not, but it's just about money, speculation, investing, that sort of thing. It's not, you know, land as a human right to produce food to eat. Like those days are over, you know? So, sorry. Labor, of course, we talked a little bit about labor, but of course, migrant workers, like we know how vulnerable migrant workers are and how undervalued they are as well. And so there's that human rights piece, and racism and poverty and fear, and, you know, it's dangerous. So, you know, that the human aspect of food, I think, is really important. Migrant workers, they have no choice but to flee their homes for a lot of different reasons. And a lot of them are because of like Canadian government policies. So, you know, people don't necessarily want to come here, but they have no choice. So that's kind of the food justice part of it. And now I'm going to just go into the Sustainable Development Goals piece. Does anybody want to say anything right now before I move into this other section? Like, is there other things?
I would just one thing, Denise. I think just recently in Regina, there's this, I haven't seen the letter, but my understanding is that the Saskatchewan government wants to sell some of the available land to corporations. So I think that is really relevant like now. I know there's a letter going around, and we were asked at Righting Relations to support it, but the email I got, somehow the attachment wasn't on it. So I asked to see that, but I know that's an issue right now that's before the government, where they want to sell off some of the crown lands to corporations. And what some of the indigenous people are asking is, hey, what about us? Like, why are you going to be selling and giving it to corporations when we are here and we're up to the task? So that's a big thing that I don't know if it fits into what we're doing, but it is something that's a concern now. So I just wanted to throw that in. It's quite relevant.
Oh, for sure. And like, for example, if you look at the grasslands in the southwest part of Saskatchewan, like that was protected, and now they're privatizing it, and now they're probably going to try and sell it off and different things. And like, there's coal bed methane under there. Like what? And there's a lot of oil, like in the dunes and stuff. There's a lot of oil over there. So it's like, what will they do? So do you just come in, take all the oil and leave a huge mess behind? Like that's what normally happens, so absolutely. We can, like Saskatchewan, I think a lot of the land already is foreign owned. So it's definitely a huge issue for sure. So I'm just going to move into the Sustainable Development Goals stuff. So I'm going to read this thing. So I just want everybody, it's like a little poem. So I'm just going to read it. Okay. Imagine a world where there is no poverty and zero hunger. We have good health and well-being, quality education, and full gender equality everywhere. There is clean water and sanitation for everyone. Affordable and clean energy has helped create decent work and economic growth. Our prosperity is fueled by investments in industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and that has helped us to reduce inequalities. We live in sustainable cities and communities, and responsible consumption and production is healing our planet. Climate action has capped the warming of the planet, and we have flourishing life below water, an abundant, diverse life on land. We enjoy peace and justice through strong institutions and have built long-term partnerships for the goals. And that is what the Sustainable Development Goals are. Like that is the vision of the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a call to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity.
Denise, Evelyn has a question.
Oh, sorry, because I have everybody turned off in that way. So yes, Evelyn?
So who made these? Like, how are these enacted? Or
I'm getting to that. And plus I'm doing a little bit of a history thing, which I find it really interesting. I hope you do too, but it is pretty interesting. So, but it won't be too long, but yes, definitely. Yeah, please let me know, Lisa, if there's a question, because I have everybody like off screen. So thank you. Okay, so it's the world's vision statement. 17 goals, 169 sub-targets, 240 indicators, and they're time bound. Because, I mean, for example, in the past with the climate accords and stuff, they're like, yeah, we're going to reduce greenhouse gases. It's like, but by when and by how much? Like you need targets and you need dates. So, so in the past, that hasn't been a thing. It's more like, yeah, we're going to have no poverty. It's like, yeah, but how and when? It's like, so this is one good thing about the Sustainable Development Goals. They're the world's most ambitious global vision for no poverty anywhere for anyone. These are them. I don't know if people have seen these, but this is, and I mean, these are all of the goals. And I know that the project is 1, 2, 3, and 10. So I did sort of pull out those 4 goals to sort of talk about them a little bit more, but I brought in some other ones too. So this is a little bit of the history. So after World War II, the planet was in ruins. People were desperate for peace after the experiences of the Holocaust in Hiroshima, and there was a desire to come together. And that's how the United Nations came to be. So they wanted to prevent war from ever happening again. They wanted to maintain peace, and they were rebuilding. Like the United Nations did a lot of rebuilding after the war. And so one of the ideas was economic development. So if we have economic development, people will have prosperity and the world will improve. Environmental sustainability. So by the 1970s, from 45 to 70, things were going great. The economy was growing and things were happening, but there was a lot of environmental degradation that came along with that growth. And of course, that's still happening. And then not only that, there was all this growth, but there was more poverty and hunger, more slums, more displaced people. Like the gap between rich and poor increased, and people were like, that wasn't the vision of the United Nations after the war. So people wanted to have, be a part of this growth. And then in 1990s, the Cold War ended. The Earth Summit took place. That was a big one. It was when the environment actually got a center role in the on the global stage. And then, so the Rio Summit, you may have heard of it. And then the Millennium Ecosystem Report. So that's like the precursor to now there's all these reports about how the environment is, like the state of the environment, basically. So that was the first one in 99. And so then in 2000, they developed the Millennium Development Goals. So that was 2000 to 2015. So it gave them 15 years to, there was 8 goals. So poverty and hunger, education, gender equality, child mortality, maternal health, combating diseases, environmental sustainability, and then a global partnership for development. So that was from 2000 to 2015. And then, but it was 10 technocrats in a room that developed them. So it was like, it only has to happen in the poor countries. There was no focus on the rich. And then the less developed countries weren't even involved in the discussion. It was like, these 10 technocrats are like, well, we're gonna solve all the world's problems. I sort of that like white saviorism that people talk about. But in contrast, the Sustainable Development Goals were the largest, most in-depth multi-stakeholder consultation in history ever negotiated. Largest gathering of heads of state, almost 200. And the entire planet was involved in creating the goals. So that's why they're different. And it's a complex vision. It took 3 years for them to negotiate it. It applies to the entire world. And that it's like, we believe we can do this. But not only that, we can't afford not to do it. Like, we have to do this. And so in each country, of course, it's different. I mean, Canada's different from Mozambique. Obviously, you have to do what your country needs. People have a lot of fear. We need to transform the world now. The scientific models are telling us that we need a radical shift. And then, of course, now we're in the climate crisis, the economic crisis, the health crisis. So hunger, domestic violence, mental health, and the pandemic. And this was before the pandemic, but now it's all I think it's come into view, obviously, really acutely. And then, of course, racism and the rise of the far right, like, as a reaction to poverty and austerity and all these things, but also that it's a huge problem. It's a contemporary problem. So it was adopted in September 2015, called the 2030 Agenda. And it's a framework of action for people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership. And I was thinking, like, in terms of the project, like, these concepts might be something that we could work with. I mean, it's pretty holistic. So, so there is 3 foundational principles. They're aspirational, universal, integrated, and indivisible. So the goal is to leave no one behind, and that we believe it can happen. The official text says, we can be the first generation to succeed in ending poverty, just as we may be the last to have a chance at saving the planet. And so the rich countries wanted to change it. And but the G77, the less developing countries were like, no, like, we need to do, this is urgent. We need to do this. And then of course it's universal. So the SDGs apply to all countries. So like, for one thing, there's poverty and hunger in Canada. There's racism, there's gender inequality. There's a lot of issues in Canada too. And further to that, Canadian foreign policy is causing a lot of the problems in the global south. So we have to change our behavior, how we relate to other countries, but also how we, operate in our own country. Like, we are not like perfect and we can, tell other people how to do it because we're so good at it. It's like, no, we've got a lot of issues in Canada as well. And then it's integrated and indivisible. So it's a set, not a menu. You can't just pick a goal, and you can't harm another goal by promoting your own goal. So for example, you can't have food security and then destroy the forests and the water. That's not what you do. You have to, all of the goals need to work together, and it's complex and interconnected, and we have to operate in that way. So they're an opportunity to consider both wicked problems and wicked solutions. So poverty, hunger, and the climate crisis, conflict. And there's all kinds of ways we can do this. There isn't one solution. And so there's multiple visions of how we can get there. So we need to stay focused on the vision, but we can't prescribe how to get there. And nobody can solve the problems alone. We need a multi-stakeholder effort, an integrative approach, and then to meet people where they're at in their community context. So that goes to what Evelyn was saying, is that, or even David too, it's like some people hunt and some people don't. Some people have more water and some people don't. Like, it depends. Then we want to talk about solidarity and justice, not charity. Like, that is the goal isn't the Band-Aid approach where we provide food to people. It's like, how do people get their own food that they want to eat, type thing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like the goals that we're working on in this project, but does anybody have any questions before I continue on? We're good for now? Okay. So goal 1, no poverty. So end poverty in all its forms everywhere. And what that is it's like the right to resources, services, control over resources, and decision-making power. So ending poverty is more than just, like, it's complex, but it's equal rights. It's a rights-based thing as well. So it's not a charity model. It's like, oh, we're going to give you this. It's like, no, I have human rights. Like, I have the right to not live in poverty. Ending hunger and achieving food security. So zero hunger is goal 2. So access to food, supporting small scale producers, adapting to climate change, and maintaining the genetic diversity of seeds. So just going back to what I said about all those targets and indicators, I just pulled a couple out of each one, but there's a lot. And Lisa had sent around that document that like has all the targets. So, we could look at those targets and say, well, we want to work on, maybe we want to support small scale producers. Maybe we want to support seed growers. Like, we could decide based on the targets and the indicators in the Sustainable Development Goals document. Good health and well-being, that's complex. It is in here, it's like health coverage and mortality. But of course, we understand that how important vaccines are, public health, and that sort of thing in the pandemic. But of course, being hungry is bad for your health, like mentally, physically. Kids, they can't learn unless they have food. So there's that idea of how it impacts your health. And also, if you're eating food that's full of chemicals and preservatives and toxins, and that's traveled, for 4,000 miles, and it has desiccants and preservatives and all those things. Like that's not good for our health. So like that local food piece is really important. So good health and well-being. And then
sorry.
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, Denise, too, like just the significant costs on the healthcare system itself, right? In regards to that. And that just brings up a whole nother area. So it's all interrelated, is what you can see. It kind of has to all come at once at the same time.
For sure. Like, what that made me think of actually was like when I get together and eat with people, it's just awesome. Like it makes me feel good. So that well-being piece and that community and, you know, that sort of thing. Also, I mean, culturally, food is extremely important to people. So like that well-being piece too, like, you know, of course, there's 10 directions you could go for each thing. And then, of course, I put gender equality in here because that is one piece. Like promoting gender equality really helps to promote. It helps everybody. It helps society. It helps, you know, it's not just like it helps women. It's like it helps everybody. So I just wanted to put that in. I know that's not one of our goals that for the project, but just like to say how interconnected everything is. And then reduced inequalities is number 10. So that's the fourth goal. So empower and promote social, economic, and political inclusion. Policy, if we were going to go down the policy route here, I don't know if we are, but I mean, I think like Manitoba is actually pretty good for policies. And I know Calgary's got some good stuff going on for food security and like food charters and stuff. So, you know, is it an advocacy campaign? Do we want food security charters? Like, is that what we're doing? You know? So there's that, like that could be a direction. And then I just did, at the University of Regina, there's a big project on goal 12. So responsible consumption and production. And that kind of goes to that piece before where it's like, where's it coming from? How long is it, you know, how far did it travel? How are the workers treated? Like, I feel like goal 12 also, you know, has a place here. And then of course, climate action. Like I said, our food system is not sustainable at all. And it's one way, it's a solution to the climate crisis. Like if we had more sustainable food. So that's exciting. And then this part, now I'm going to stop now, but this part is just like how Canada's doing. Like, what is it about the SDGs? So there's an SDG unit, which I'm sure that's where this funding came from. The SDGs are included in the minister mandate letters, like the ministers are supposed to work on the SDGs. They're working on a national implementation strategy. And the fact that this money came out, I feel like they're starting to push their strategy. So that's exciting. And then just the idea of like partnership. And then I put in this piece about monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, because how are we monitoring our project? How are we evaluating it? And then this is the just working together, like across provinces, across the prairies, like how can we work together and do capacity building and networking collectively? And then there's just a bunch of slides about the goals. So anybody can research any of these and learn more about the goals. So what's Canada doing? These are a couple of like, where are they falling down? So there's a couple of academic articles. Civil society, like community foundations are working on it. Alliance 2030, there's a guidebook. Of course, there's a private sector. Where does the private sector fit in here too? You know, the private sector is meant to be reaching the goals as well. And then this is just some of the things like how's the government doing? What could we do provincially? What about municipally? There's so much latitude and opportunity there. And I guess that's it. That is the end. So yeah, so all those resources are available for if anybody wants more information, because of course we have to figure out what we're working on. So there was just one slide in there that I should have taken out, but other than that, that's my presentation.
Thank you so much. My head is swimming.
Me too. Hey,
Awesome.
when you mentioned that Manitoba had like a charter, is that like through the Social Planning Council, or which one are you referring to?
I don't actually know. I just know that Manitoba, I mean, you produce more food. You produce a lot of food. Like your domestic food production is really good. And so, and I've done a couple things with, in Manitoba, and I don't know exactly, is it Food Secure Manitoba maybe? I'm not exactly sure what it's called, but I know that like Manitoba is a model for the rest of us. So, and then of course the permaculture, they do permaculture in the universities in Manitoba. Like there is a lot going on in Manitoba. Like I love Manitoba.
We also have a lot of poverty, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's true. And racism, let's not forget
Oh
that.
yeah, totally. They kind of go hand in hand, sadly.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I guess like too is I'll try to contribute a little here because Denise has got this pretty good, but there's like a macro and global way to look at this and kind of fight it. And really, I just kind of at the local level, it's really trying to figure out what pulse are you at, like what's going on in your community, where do you kind of see yourself? And there's tons of little projects, and I think that's going to be a really important thing is just figuring out what's going on and the best way to maybe advance and drive the work forward, right? Like maybe there's like, it could be like as simple as making some sort of videos or whatever the case is, as long as, you know, we're looking at what's going on. So even at the food bank, we're talking about food waste, and I look at how we receive our food. It's really based on, you know, like a breakdown in the whole food production scale, right? Like Loblaws is sending it to because there's like an imperfect date, right? There's just too much food produced. It's not that we need to produce more food, we need to waste less food, right? And so some of the things that we've done is like the vermicomposting workshop, and I know Saskatoon has composting coaches, for example, like little small scale projects, really trying to reach, because you know, like more than half of the food waste is being wasted at the house level, like at people's homes, right? Like that banana you left on the counter, or that lettuce you let go bad, right? And so we kind of have to look at, you know, some tips for reducing that as well, whether that's, you know, making sure you're meal planning, because, you know, not everybody can buy organic and not everybody can do their thing, but like, you know, meal planning so you don't buy too much more than you need. Or if it's even just being more mindful of your recycling practices, right? How do you recycle those things, or purchase products that are environmentally friendly, whether they use less packaging, no packaging, or environmentally friendly packaging. You know, assessing what you currently purchase and you know, consider changing those behaviors as well. So I think there's a lot of, you know, local levels we can look at it, like just trying to target households and people as well. And then even like the idea, so waste reduction and recycling education, super important. And then also, what was I going to say? Like that community collaboration and conversation, like right now in Regina, we do have the city of Regina on board, facilitating circles and roundtables each week with people in the community, and it's called a community wellbeing table. And there is a specific table for food security and for shelter as well. So I know that there's, and that's going to be our opportunity to shift policies and really get connected to the people that can help us make those shifts as well. So I think that's really important, is that collaboration piece of all the stakeholders and trying to figure out how to connect people. And then there's, oh yeah, like, and then for us, we did the 4-season urban agriculture project as well. So you're educating people about where their food comes from, how to grow it. And not to say everybody needs to grow their own food, but, you know, I think that's one of the solutions, is not this broad scale food production, but like the localized food production and being able to do that in community, kind of like we used to. Like we used to have so many community gardens in Regina, and they all got taken away. Like the 4th Avenue, the cemetery is like a huge plot of land. It used to be all community gardens, and it was just gone. So I think that's important, because kids, yeah, they don't know where their food is coming from at all. They think it's coming from the supermarket. They have no idea. So just having equipment and like really tangible, practical things available for kids, like whether it's in their school or in their home, in community, there just needs to be that intergenerational learning, I think, and an opportunity just to have a conversation about food and the whole system itself. one more thing. Yeah, indoor gardening workshop. I thought that was a really practical thing to do. We literally bought the seed, soil, equipment that you would need to grow food in your house for like year round. And then we taught people how to do it in a very simple way. And then from there, they had the tools to go forward with it, because, you know, it's one thing to educate, but then if somebody doesn't have the means or the ability to access the supplies, then why do it? So I think that was a really important part. Same with vermicomposting workshops. We literally gave them the worms and everything to get started, and just like a bit of education around it. And that's where we talked about the food waste and everything too, so people can be more mindful of that kind of stuff, because I think we're just disconnected, right? Or a lot of people are. Yeah, so that was kind of like what I wanted to we can talk about it, we can chat about it, but I think we need to look at too, like, what are the minor, like the micro things that we can do as well in our communities that maybe make that macro picture a little bit more manageable, and like kind of see pathways on how we're getting there.